content 2, I will introduce the overall economic and give more details about the economic history of the United Kingdom in 17th and 18th centuries. Nowadays, the economy of the United Kingdom is highly developed and market-oriented. It is the sixth largest national economy in the world measured by the nominal gross domestic product and 22nd largest by GDP per capita, comprising 3.3% of world GDP. It's also the second largest inward foreign direct investment and the third largest outward foreign direct investment. The UK is one of the most globalized economies. The sector dominated, contributing around 80% of GDP. The financial services industry is particularly important, and London is the world's largest financial center. Britain's aerospace industry is the second largest national aerospace industry. Its pharmaceutical industry, the 10th largest in the world, plays an important role in the economy. The size of London economy makes it the largest city by GDP in Europe. In the 18th century, the UK was the first country to industrialize, and during the 19th century, it had a dominant role in the global economy. Unlucky, in 1900s, the cost of fighting World War I and II weakened the UK's relative position. In the 21st century, however, the UK remains a great power with the ability to rotate power and influence around the world. The currency of the UK is pound sterling, which is the world's fourth largest reserve currency. To understand why the economy has developed it is today, let's find more about the economic history of Britain that has gone through its state. Britain and Ireland in particular become one of the most prosperous economic regions in Europe between 1600s and 1700s. The most famous thing I would mention are export and wool industry. Especially within the British Empire, export started to increase heavily in these periods. Mostly privately owned companies traded with the colonies in Northern America, West Indies, and India. The Company of Merchant Adventure London brought together London's leading overseas merchants in a regular company in the early 15th century in the nature of a guide. Its members' main business were the export of clothes, especially white woolen clothes. This enabled them to import a large range of foreign goods. Woolen clothes were the chief export and more important employer after agriculture. Export merchants, known as merchant adventurers, exported woolens into the Netherlands and Germany, as well as other lands. Government intervention proved a disaster in the early 17th century. The export of unfinished clothes was less profitable than the export of finished product. The government got to ban the export of unfinished clothes. There were massive dislocation marketplace and a large unsold quantity built-up. Prices fell and unemployment rose. Was upon the refused to import any finished clothes from Ireland. Export fell a third. In 18th century, the trading nation was prosperous entrepreneurs extended the range of their business around the globe. By 1720, Britain was one of the most prosperous countries in the world. Britain had a different set of primary interests. Its main diplomatic goal, besides protecting the homeland from invasion, were building a worldwide trading network for its merchants, manufacturers, shipbuilders, and financiers. The London government enhanced the private sector by incorporating private financial London-based companies for establishing trading posts and opening import-export businesses abroad the world. Britain gained dominance in the trade with India and largely dominated the highly lucrative slave, sugar, and commercial trades. Besides woolens, cotton, silk, and linen cloth, manufacturing became important after 1600s, as did coal and iron. The ensuing availability of inexpensive iron was one of the factors leading to the Industrial Revolution. Toward the end of 18th century, cast iron, began to replace wrought iron for certain purposes because it was cheaper. In a period slowly dated from the 1770s to the 1820s, Britain experienced an accelerated process of economic change that transformed a largely agrarian economy into the world's first industrial economy. This phenomenon is known as the Industrial Revolution, since the changes were far-reaching and permanent throughout many areas of Britain, especially in the developing cities. Starting in the later part of the 18th century, it started with the Americanization of textile industry, the development of iron-making techniques, and the increased use of refined coal. Trade expansions were enabled by the introduction of canals, improved roads, and railways. The development of all-metal machine tools in the first 2 decades of the 19th century facilitated the manufacture of more production machines for manufacturing in other industries. In the late 18th century and early 19th century, a series of technological advances led to the Industrial Revolution. Britain's position as the world's preeminent trader have firmed research and experimentation. The Industrial Revolution saw a rapid transformation in the richest economy in society. These manufactured goods were sold around the world, and raw materials and luxury goods were imported to Britain.
Hello, my name is Anto. Today I will talk about the economy of United Kingdom during 19th century. Britain was the world's richest and most advanced economy. Real GDP proportion almost doubled in the 90 years between 1790 and 1970, when it reached about $3,000 per capita. This was 1/3 greater than GDP proportion in the United States and 70% more than both France and Germany. The economy was the most industrialized in the world, with 1/3 of the population employed in manufacturing by 1870. Concurrently, 1/6 of the workforce in the United States was employed in manufacturing. In 1920s was called consumer boom. In spite of the serious problems that plagued heavy industry, the 1920s marked an era of unprecedented growth for the British consumer industry. Until then, a minor player in the national economy, while not creating a fully fledged consumer culture as the United States during the same decade. It had an important effect over British society, primarily on the middle classes, which gained access to commodities previously reserved for the upper class, primarily automobiles. Ownership rising tenfold during the interwar period, from around 500,000 in 1919 to approximately over 3 million in 1929 and 5 million in 2039. Sales of electric appliances bound thanks to the rise of consumer-oriented credit and loans. Higher wage and shorter worker hours also lead to the rise of recreation. Gramophone records, radio or Wi-Fi, magazines and cinema became part of everyday life, much like sports, primarily football and cricket. In 1929 to 1939, this is a picture of the Great Depression unemployed people in front of a workhouse in London in 1930. In 1919, Britain reduced the working hours in major industry to 48-hour week for industrial workers. Historians have debated whether this move depression labor productivity and contributed to the slump. Monetary policy of post-war governments also contributed to high unemployment. In 1945 to 1951, it was the age of austerity. After the end of World War II, the British economy had again lost huge amounts of absolute wealth. Its economy was driven entirely for the needs of war and took some time to be reorganized for peaceful production. This is a picture of snowbound bursts in Huddersfield Fire during the record cold winter of 1946 to 1947, which caused major fuel shortages and damaged Britain's fragile post-war economic recovery. Prosperity of the 1950s. The 1950s and 1960s were prosperous times and saw continued modernization of the economy. Representative was the construction of the first motorways. For example, Britain maintained and increased its financial role in the world economy and used the English language to promote its educational system to students from around the globe. Unemployment was relatively low during this period, and the standard of living continued to rise. In 1979 to 1990 was called the Thatcher era. The early 1980s recession saw unemployment rates above 3 million, but the subsequent recovery, which saw annual growth of over 4% in the late 1980s, led to contemporary claims of a British economic miracle. By the end of 1986, Britain was in the first stage of an economic boom, which saw unemployment fall below 3 million and reach a 10-year low of 1.6 million by December 1989. However, the rate of economic growth slowed down in 1989, with inflation approaching 10% and fears of an imminent recession being rife in the national media. From 1997 to 2001 was called the New Labour. Unemployment was constantly below 1.5 million during the first half of the 2000s by the New Labour government, a level not seen since the late 1970s. Although the government never succeeded in getting unemployment back into the six-figure totals, which was seen for most of the 30 years after the end of World War II.
Today I'm gonna talk about the 21st century of economy in UK. In the Labour Party's second term in office, beginning in 2001, when it achieved another landslide victory, the party increased taxes and borrowing. The government wanted the money to increase spending on public services, notably the National Health Service. The economy shifted from manufacturing, which had been declining since the 1960s, and grew on the back of the services and finance sectors, while the public sector continued to expand. The Labour Party won the third general election in 2005. Unemployment had increased slightly to 1.6 million, although the economy continued to grow. The pound continued to fluctuate, however, reaching a low against the dollar in 2001. Since then, the effects on the credit crunch have led to the slowdown of economy. So we move to the part, the 2008 recession and quantitative easing of UK. In October 2007, the International Monetary Fund, known as IMF, had forecasted British GDP to grow by 3.1% in 2007 and 2.3% in 2008. However, GDP growth slowed to fall up 0.1% in the April-June in the second quarter of 2008. The UK entered the recession in quarter 2 of 2008, according to UK Office for National Statistics, as known as ONS, and existed in the quarter of 2009. On 26 January 2010, it was confirmed that the UK had left its recession the last major economy in the world to do so. Quarter third of 2010 figures released show the UK economy grew by 0.8%. This was the fastest quarter third growth in 10 years. This suggests that UK initially lagged between its European neighbors because the UK entered the 2008 recession later. Analysts suggest that UK suffered a slightly longer recession than other large European countries as a result of government policy dating back to the policies. The downturn in economy during 2008 and 2009 saw the popularity of Labour government slump and opinion polls also the Conservative in the lead during this time. Early in 2010, the gap between the parties was narrow enough to suggest that the imminent general election would result in a home parliament. As happened in May 2010, the Conservatives have formed a government in coalition with the Liberal Democrats. In 2010, the economy picked up and growing steadily in summer. The Eurozone crisis centered on Greece led to the second slowdown in all European countries. The Eurozone entered a double-dip recession that lasted from quarter first 2011 until quarter second 2013, and while the UK had no double-dip recession indeed, however, experienced stagnant growth. Quarter second 2013, the UK economy continued to grow for 5 consecutive quarters, the longest since quarter first of 2008, showing the growth beating most developed economies, helped by the rebounds in housing market and strong growth in both manufacturing and services industries. The UK government posted a 107.6 billion national deficit for the fiscal years ending March 2014, meeting the target of 107.7 billion set a month previously. This was especially impressive since many countries in the Euros, more specifically in the Euros, were stagnating, such as France and Italy.